Okay, now here's what I want you to do. Most of you are sitting next to somebody. I'm going to have you go to work for about 3 minutes. And this is a very important exercise. I'll tell you about a similar one that I did. But of all of this stuff, let me review. There are people in Hong Kong who don't know God, but they would like to, deep down. Millions of them. They're thinking about going to a church. They haven't gone yet. When they walk in the door, they want to touch and experience from God. How is that most likely going to happen in an evangelical church in Hong Kong? I want you to work with each other in groups of 2s and 3s, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to say, in Hong Kong, because I don't know Hong Kong, I know Chicago, I want you to rank order. In other words, I want you to say, the most important 5 ways that we can touch people who come to church in Hong Kong when they come for the first time. We believe Hong Kong people want this first, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Yes? Do you understand your assignment? Go to work with them. And they're yearning to have an experience with God in Hong Kong, at a church in Hong Kong. And we're saying, well, how is that most likely to happen in rank order? What do you think? What has to be at the top, do you think? All that talk, and now you're not talking.
Welcome or an acceptance.
You say an acceptance. And any agreement with that? How many of you had anything like that as your top one? Similar? What was your words? Yes. Community. Okay, well, we're going to talk about that as a separate one. So, welcome. Yep, okay. Was that your top one? Okay. How many did you guys have? What was your top 1 or 2? Acceptance. Okay, you had worship. That we're going to handle differently. The presence of God, yeah, that you're... That's what we're working on here. All right, so now I'm not trying to do your work for you. In fact, let's do this just to keep it clean. I feel like in the room, a lot of you said community, welcoming, acceptance, these kinds of things. How many of you said that was really, really important in Hong Kong? Okay, that's going to be like, I'm going to say 60% of you said that's really important, about 60% of you. Is there anything that you would all agree on that is even more important than that? You would like to propose teaching. Can we have any support for it? In fact, let's even say, this is the way we talk about it around Willow, fantastic sermons. Just hear me out. If fantastic sermons were being preached every week in your church, would that help the church or hurt the church? How many of you think fantastic sermons really matter? 55%. Okay? It's because you preachers are all voting and, yeah, you don't want to set the bar so high is what, yeah. Okay, so now, all right, so the couple that I had dinner with last night, very successful, very wealthy. In fact, they're so successful and wealthy that they're beginning to feel the emptiness. Because another $10 million isn't, they already have more than they need. They can travel anywhere. They go all these, they have 3 homes. They don't need any more homes. I think now they're looking for God. Yeah. And yeah, I'll take your card. So if they came, they're very smart people. I think they would want to learn something, and I think they would want to learn something that had intellectual rigor, that had theological vitality. I think they would want that. I think they would really want to be welcomed. I think they would want to feel like they weren't strange and outsiders. Okay? What would be a third? I think we have general agreement. We're close on these top two. What's a very, very important third? An encounter with God. Well, what we're trying to say is, the way we're setting up the argument is we want them to have an encounter with God, and we're saying they're going to have it through the sermon, through the community. Yeah, so here's what I want to ask next. Can we, do you ever combine music and prayer and ministry to people? I mean, this can be done beautifully. You're worshiping, someone's leading in worship, and while you're doing worship, you say, if anyone has a pressing need, while the worship continues, would you come forward? The pastor and a few elders of the church will pray with you quietly, and then you can return to your seat while the whole rest of the church continues to worship. This is being done all over the world. It's a beautiful thing. So can we say worship and ministry and prayer? Yes? Okay. Yes, we're getting unity in the house here. It's a little harder than I thought it was going to be to get. But, all right. So what else is not on the list yet that should be? They want an encounter with God. They might get it through the sermon. They might get it through being welcomed, and they might get it through worship. How else might they get an encounter with God? Yeah, that's exactly right, gang. This is one of the things I feel so strongly about this. I call it story, but we can call it testimony. You know what? My smart friends from last night, one of the reasons they stay a little bit interested in God, just a little bit, is because they say this to me. They say, you're a college-educated, normal, successful man who happens to be a Christian, and you're the only one we know. So if they came to a church and there was a college-educated woman or man who seemed pretty smart, who stood up in front of the church and said, here's how God has touched my life, that couple would listen to that. They'd be riveted. They say, you mean God touches the lives of normal, intelligent, successful people? How can that? Really? Because that's what I hope he'll do to me someday. I tell our team at Willow that we need many, many more stories of how God is touching people in our church. And we had a man, we tell a very hard story a few months back. He had done something illegal in his business, and he had been arrested and tried and convicted. So he stood up in front of our church and he admitted that he had done wrong in his business. He apologized before God and before our church for being a bad witness for Christ. He said, now I'm headed to prison, and would you please pray for me? And he was surrounded by prayer, but everyone who visited our church that week saw honesty. They saw humility. They saw brokenness. They saw the real thing, and it touched them. But when I work with my staff, I keep saying there's not 100 ways that people are going to have an encounter with God when they come to our church. It's not 100. It's more than likely 4 or 5 ways that we need to be clear about. And if we can agree on these ways of someone or helping someone have an encounter with God, should we improve them or just let them stay status quo? Come on. Absolutely. You know, especially the church in the West, and I'm talking about the U.S. right now, or even in Europe in some places, we just say, oh, God, help our churches advance. Well, God's like, how do you want me to do that? You know, how do you want me to do it? Should you play any part? And what I like to do with church leaders is I say, churches can and will advance if certain things are going on and anointed by the Spirit of God week after week after week. If there's anointed preaching, I'm not kidding you. How many of you have heard a fantastic sermon at some time in your life? Raise your hand. You know what I do at dinner parties? Gary, I did this in China. I don't remember. This might have been in Shanghai or Beijing or something. I had about 25 people at a dinner. And I said, give the title and the general thought of one of the greatest sermons you've ever heard. We went around the table. It took us about an hour and a half. We were laughing. We were crying. We were astounded at the power of good preaching. How many of you would say you actually you made a change in your life because of a sermon? Okay? Yes? Can you remember what sermon?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell the group just quickly what the sermon was? Tell them, here.
It was actually at a conference, so it was but it was a sermon. And it was all about how God is building his church brick by brick, and it was on Nehemiah's wall, and how people would come, and everybody in the church needs to come and bring a brick and to build the wall. And it was really just incredibly challenging about you in the church as an individual. What brick are you bringing? And it really challenged me to think about where I'm at in my community and what I'm doing.
So that's good preaching, isn't it? There's a wall going up. The kingdom is being built. There's a church being built. You're a part of it. You need to bring your brick. What brick are you bringing to build this wall for God? Who else has a sermon that changed your life that you can still remember to this day?
It was in my college time when the preacher told me for the first time in my life that Christians are not stupid. And seriously, I always thought that only those ugly girls will go to church. Only those uneducated, unsuccessful men will go to church. But that preacher challenged us, a group of college students, that you should offer the best to God, not the worst or not the leftover. And it forever changed my life.
Right, here's the point I'm making, and I will say this till my dying breath. Okay? Fantastic sermons matter. They matter. They're one of the most important reasons why anybody goes to church. They want to hear the Word of God. In the U.S., we would say, we want to be rocked. We want to be rocked by the Word of God. So, your job as church leaders is to improve the sermons at your church. If you're the preacher, improve them. If you're the leader who has many teachers, improve them. Improve the sermons at your church. It matters. Sometimes we're in a series right now on the book of Proverbs. And so we call it wiser. We want to be wiser in the future than we've been in the past. Wiser. It's an 11-week series, okay?